My middle son, I was told by his teacher has ADHD. And I was told that time to explore, therapy, medication, all sorts of nonsense I was being told. I said, this kid doesn't have ADHD. And I dug into his DNA and I wasn't looking for ADHD. What I was looking for was which biological pathways don't work so well. And what is the context here? Like what time of day, what time of year, all that stuff. And there was going to be something that's going to jump out as an anomaly where this behavior is displaying, by the way, in one teacher's classroom, not in every teacher's classroom. So what I found was he has the worst possible insulin resistance genetics. TCF7L2 is a gene pathway that drives in your insulin response. So he's the kind of born insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, right?
Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany, where women optimize. I'm your host, Brittany Ford, holistic nutritionist and wellness entrepreneur, and I'm here to help you live in alignment with your body and nature. This podcast blends cutting-edge science with soul-led strategies to support you through every phase of womanhood, from fertility to longevity and everything in between. Each week, we dive into functional medicine, women's health, holistic healing, and biohacking tools that empower you to take control of your wellness journey. Let's redefine what it means to thrive together. Today on the podcast, I have the privilege of talking to Kashif Khan. This is actually the second time he's come on the show, and he is somebody who I admire greatly. Love what he's doing in the children's health space, to be honest. He kind of started out in the world of DNA and then really moved into how do we optimize our DNA and how do we learn from it and use it as a blueprint for our kids. So he produces so much great content. Seriously, his Instagram is one of my favorite accounts to follow. I will link it in the show notes and on the website so you can find it easily. And enjoy this podcast episode where we dive deep into my son's genetics. There's so much I learned in this episode, honestly, about foundational genes, and you can hear him in the background here a little bit. Do you want to say hi on the mic? I mean, this episode is about you. And we just learned so much about what Callahan is going to be like one day in terms of career and emotion and disease and body build and all of these things. And there's so many take home golden nuggets about this episode, honestly. And I really, really encourage you, if you have not done it yet, to get the genetics done of your children. Get your DNA looked at, get your DNA looked at, get your kids' DNA looked at, and really start to kind of put the pieces together of like what their future is actually going to look like and what you as a mom or dad can do about it, right? Like what supplements can you put them on? What lifestyle practices, you want to say hi? What lifestyle practices can you start doing with them right now to build healthy habits so that they are super healthy and strong and resilient one day? We all want to be growing and developing very resilient kids in today's world. So enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think. This is one of my favorite episodes I've probably done all summer. And I will catch you very soon for another one. You can always reach me at Biohacking Brittany on Instagram, and I will answer your messages there. And a quick shout out to Bioptimizers who are sponsoring this episode. I am obsessed with their magnesium. Magnesium is involved in over 300 processes in the body. Honestly, every single person should be taking magnesium. I took it last night. My husband takes it, when he's stressed or has a headache. I take it when I'm tired all the time. So I really suggest you check out Bioptimizer's magnesium. It has all 7 forms of magnesium in it. It's the only one on the market that has that. So check it out on my website, biohackingbrittany.com, and I will catch you soon for another episode. Welcome back to Biohacking with Brittany. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Today, I have Kashif Khan back on the show, and I am so excited because we are actually going to be diving into my son's DNA. So I have a son, a baby boy. He is 11 months old, and I did his DNA test, I don't even know, sometime in the last 6 months, and I got the results and said, okay, I need to talk to Kash about this. What does this mean for his behavior, his development, his future, what should we kind of focus on with his health. And Cash is gracious enough to actually come on the show and kind of go through his DNA with me. So Cash, welcome to the show again.
Pleasure. This is so cool. We get to like look out in the future and see who's this little guy going to become, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'll send him this podcast episode one day.
Yeah, look what mom had to do for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Look how much effort I put in.
yeah.
So I before I guess we dive in, I do want to ask, from your experience as a dad, would you say that getting your kids' DNA tested at such a young age is there a point to it, or do you think you might as well just wait until they're a bit older?
I would say depends what tool you use and how you interpret the data. So the challenge with most genetic testing reports, I would say, aren't designed for the context of a child. They're designed for looking for rare disease markers, trying to tell a woman about risk of breast cancer when you're already at the age of risk, right? And they're not designed for who is this child going to develop into physically, who are they going to be mentally, what courses should I be planning for them to be taking, what sports are they going to thrive at. When the gut of a young child is thriving, you don't actually know what is going to cause them to gain weight or lose weight. As we age, the considerations are very different, right? So that's where I would say yes, if you have the right interpretation for the context of a child.
Mm, right. And I guess most of the reports just don't even really think about that because they don't necessarily worry too much about child's health.
It all starts with disease and then building tools to respond to disease, and then sometimes building tools to figure out the root cause of disease. That's kind of the best we have as functional medicine.
Yeah.
But we're not going way before that of like, what are the habits to never even need to ask these questions? So that's where there's a gap. And I only do this work because I'll go sit with the family of, mom and dad and figure things out. Like, you know what? We need this for our kids.
Mm.
And then so I'm kind of forced to rethink the data in the context of what's important for a child.
Yeah. How has this type of work impacted you as a dad?
So let me give you a simple example. My middle son, I was told by his teacher, has ADHD. And I was told that time to explore, therapy, medication, all sorts of nonsense I was being told. I said, this kid doesn't have ADHD. And I dug into his DNA and I wasn't looking for ADHD. What I was looking for was which biological pathways don't work so well. And what is the context here? Like what time of day, what time of year, all that stuff. And there was going to be something that's going to jump out as an anomaly where this behavior is displaying, by the way, in one teacher's classroom, not in every teacher's classroom. So
Mm.
what I found was he has the worst possible insulin resistance genetics. TCF7L2 is a gene pathway that drives in your insulin response. So he's the kind of born insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, right? His amylase activity, his enzyme activity for breaking down and using starches as a fuel source, worst possible, right? So he has this horrible ability to use starch as fuel and turn it into the glucose you need. He has a ability to regulate the insulin response from that glucose. And the teacher that was complaining was right after lunch in a household where he was given rice and non-bread every day because he came from a South Asian home. And he was literally in a carb crash coma. So his ability to focus had nothing to do with a cognitive issue. It was a metabolic issue. And no surprise, there was only one teacher complaining. Now, there was more to it. I can get into like other neurochemicals and his propensity towards detail, etc. But that was a big aha moment for me. And then there's just the way they structure how do we actually get the outcome? If project is due on Friday, the path to get project done on Friday is not the same for each one of these three kids that I'm growing up, because the way they perceive reward and challenge is very different. And
Right.
so I structure how I speak to them and how we structure their work differently that actually gets them to the finish line without all this friction and frustration.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Is that not just a ton of work on your end to
It
have
becomes
to
intuitive. It's kind of like you understand a personality, you understand a trait of any sort, and it becomes just intuitive that this is how I speak to this person,
Yeah.
right? Once you learn it.
Right. So is it like more direct language versus like more softer tones for one kid? Like what, like, I guess what would be the different examples for the
Yeah.
different kids?
So one of my kids has a dysregulated genetic pathway for adrenaline. And adrenaline, we know of it as this, neurochemical around that high intensity moment. But the other thing that adrenaline does, so in that high intensity moment, your biology changes and you become superhuman to tolerate whatever that thing is. But the other thing your body does is it uses adrenaline to imprint impactful information to make sure you avoid that problem in the future. So essentially, it creates trauma.
Mm.
One of my kids has and he got this from me, dysregulation for adrenaline in a significant way. So he uses emotion as a decision-making tool. He remembers what things feel like. So when he gets disciplined, it's very much so about if I walk into the room again frowning, it's like, what did I do this time? Right?
Oh,
Versus the other kid is like already on to the next problem, right? So already like forgotten about the discipline he just received because his adrenaline pathway is very healthy. So he filters and remembers and recalls very intellectually, right?
wow.
And void of the emotion. And so even now, but on the flip side, the one that has this propensity towards using emotion is also far more caring, far more empathetic. He's always like, I'll share this with you, right?
Mhm.
Works the other way too. And the other one is like, no, that's mine, go away. Right.
Yeah.
So it's meant to be a tool. All of these things that we use words like anxiety, depression, etc., they actually come from not acknowledging or understanding our unique cognitive superpower and then ending up in a context that you weren't designed for. My middle son could be an empathetic coach that everyone leans on, or he could be full of trauma and not able to function, depending on what he's doing with that tool.
Hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's
Yeah.
very powerful.
And I see a trait like that in Callahan that would show up eventually, right?
Okay.
And what I see is that yeah, so there's an area where we very commonly see parents will be told your child has ADHD,
Okay.
right? And what does ADHD look like? You can't pay attention, you can't focus, you don't follow instructions. And so with Callahan, what he's doing is dopamine is this reward seeking chemical, right? It allows you to experience pleasure, but also reward, which is achievement. And the way we look at it genetically is step one, DRD2 comes along. It's a gene that determines the density of dopamine receptors in your brain. How intense is that moment of satisfaction? Then there's a gene called MAO that's responsible to break the dopamine down. There's another gene to eventually get you back to your baseline. There's another gene called COMP that makes a protein that gets that dopamine out of your head, right? So now you come back to where you started, where you're supposed to be. So what he's doing is the dopamine hit for him is slightly underwhelming. It's kind of like minus 30% what it should be. So there's going to be a lack of satisfaction. Like things aren't as good as people say they are. But the clearance is as slow as it could possibly be. So he gets stuck in this sort of reward seeking or pleasure seeking moment for far too long, which to the outward person looking in looks like he's not interested, he doesn't care, he doesn't follow instructions. Why does he have drive or motivation? So he is wired to be a binger. He is wired for he's content, he's happy, he's satisfied. He doesn't need to chase or pursue like most people do. It's actually mentally a very healthy place to be, by the way, right?
Hmm.
Content, right? But when you're trying to function in a team of people or a classroom, that contentment looks like you're not paying attention, you don't care, you nod your head and say yes, but you still don't do it. So what he's going to appear to how he's going to operate is the things that he takes deep interest in, he's going to binge and way overdo. He's
Hmm.
gonna, yeah, he's going to become like this more specialist subject matter expert that really dives deep into what he cares about, and the stuff that he doesn't care about, he's going to procrastinate, and create anxiety for himself. And then at the last minute, oh, deadline was Friday at 5. I started at 4:30 on Friday, right?
Wow.
That's so. What he's going to need is structure. His brain prioritizes by what he wants versus what he needs to do. Some people prioritize by what the pressing need is right now, the fire in their belly, got to get it done. Some people prioritize by fear of missing out, by what they prefer, what tastes good, right? Versus what's healthy in the moment. That's how his brain works. And that's not a bad thing. It drives incredible, talk to the best chef. Why do they create such incredible dishes? Because they do what they enjoy and what they want and what they think is the best way to do it, right? That's how he's wired. So picture an artist, an expert of some sort, right? and picture that he's going to need structure around the things that he's not interested in. Right? Which means the big story of this is due Friday at 5 needs to be broken down into, well, here's a little bit that's due on Monday, a little bit due on Tuesday, a little bit due on, because he's going to procrastinate each one of those micro deadlines. Right?
Yeah.
So know that about him. The other thing you should know about him is his brain is really going to function well with clear instruction with the deadline versus outcome. Some people see, show me this shiny object, show me what I'm going to get, and I'll find my path to it.
Yeah.
For him, it's more like, tell me what needs to be done and when it's due and leave me alone. Right? He's not interested in the outcome because he's very content. He's more interested in the process.
Interesting.
So now those little tidbits, if you didn't know that about him and you just throw him in a classroom and trying to be like everybody else, very easily could have been told he doesn't pay attention, he doesn't finish on time, he only did 6 out of the 20 things he was supposed to do, he has ADHD.
Huh.
Right?
So does he have the genetic markers for ADHD or?
No, I would say the vast majority of what gets labeled as ADHD is not real.
Yeah.
And it's usually an incredible superpower. What is his strength? He is a binger. He is a person that's meant to be an expert, a specialist. Like, let me do what I'm really good at.
Yeah.
But I may not do the other side. I need to delegate and have people around me to do the admin and the legal. I'm not going to do it all.
Yeah.
Right? So now that's a strength. But when you put that in a context where we don't use our strengths and every child in the classroom is supposed to do the exact same thing, it's like putting a Ferrari in a track with a bunch of, mud trucks running through the mud. It's still a Ferrari, but it's not going to last in the mud so well, right? Context is very important. What are you designed for? So his design is that binger, deep thinker, high quality worker versus generalist.
Ever snap at your partner over something small and then wonder, why did that bother me so much? Or maybe you're waking up groggy, craving sugar, breaking out, or feeling just off in your body, like your hormones are whispering or yelling that something is out of balance. If any of this sounds familiar to you, you are not alone. These are signs your body is calling out for support, and magnesium might be the missing piece. Magnesium is one of those non-negotiable minerals, especially for women. It plays a critical role in hormone regulation, stress response, blood sugar balance, sleep, and even skin and muscle function. But here's the problem. Most of us are deficient, especially during high stress seasons. Hello, modern life, motherhood, and go, go, go careers. Food alone often isn't enough. So that's why I take Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers every single night. It's the only formula I found that includes all 8 forms of magnesium, including magnesium orotate, which specifically supports metabolic and hormonal health. I love it because it helps with deep restorative sleep, stress relief, and nervous system regulation, better digestion and fewer cravings, and supports my body through every hormonal phase, from luteal to postpartum. This is your permission slip to slow down and nourish yourself at the cellular level. Go to bioptimizers.com/biohackingbritney and use code biohackingbritney for 10% off. Even better, subscribe and you'll never miss a month. Plus, you'll unlock deeper discounts and free gifts as well. Trust me, your body, your mood, and your hormones will thank you. So when he's young, like let's say elementary school, maybe even high school, before we get to a level of like subject like expertise, which you might get to in your career, how could we foster him to explore different passions for him to then find like, hey, this is the passion that I'm going to go in deep on?
Well, in that regard, one other thing you should know about him is he regulates serotonin excellent, right? So serotonin is this mood regulating neurochemical, which we call it the happy hormone. And the way it does that is it allows your brain to prioritize information and stimulus around you. So we're here chatting. Some people are paying attention. Some people are saying one of the pot lights is dead. He needs to change the bulb, right? So who's paying attention and who's not? That's serotonin that allows you to either see more than you're supposed to or highly prioritize what's in front of you. So he is wired that way, where his brain is very much about big picture macro as opposed to the micro details.
Yeah.
Right? So now the question is, well, how do you structure this so it's all done the right way? Knowing this guy is wired to be more of a strategist, more of the, if you have a team full of people, he's the guy that sort of steers the ship, doesn't sit down and get his hands dirty,
Hmm.
right? So and that's needed. Every team needs that, right? He sees the big picture, he sees the macro. He's not concerned so much about crossing every T and dotting every I, but the people that are good at that can't see the big picture. They're too deep and anal about all the details, right?
Right.
So that's again finding the role, falling into that role, and it's neurochemicals. They're now. It's not like you're waiting for a certain age. This is who he's becoming tomorrow, right?
Right.
So start to work in that way, which is in that team of people, whatever he's doing, try and fall in that, like you said, fostering who he is. Foster. He's the leader guy. He's a strategist. He's the guy that pulls everybody else forward.
Wow. So
Yeah.
in that sense, like in terms of careers, like he might actually do pretty well as an entrepreneur or like someone running a company and just like delegating all the little things that
Yes.
he doesn't want to do.
He would do well as an entrepreneur in something that he actually enjoys.
Cares.
Right? He has to like it. Like it's not like he's not gonna care about the reward as much as he's going to care about the process and enjoying it. And if he's not going to enjoy it, he won't do it.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I need to cross-reference my DNA snippets with this because I feel like I'm like that. Like I'm so passionate about health that like it's never been about the outcome.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't feel like work, like all the things that I do. And my dad is actually like that with engineering. He's a very smart guy. He's not very street smart, but he's like very passionate about metallurgy and like metals engineering. So I
Yeah.
wonder if like that's actually the trickle down there if we were to take a look at all of our DNA.
And just so you know, this trait can come from different places. So where it's coming from him is that he stays in pleasure or reward for too long, which means contentment, which means prioritizing what he wants. For some other people, it can come from sense of purpose, which is if the adrenaline genetics aren't good, like his are great. If the adrenaline genetics aren't good, then they do have more emotional thinking that the purpose becomes important. So it's not because of the pleasure, but it's because of the intention, right? So the outcome can look the same, but come from different genes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I wonder, I think mine might be more purpose, like the way that you described that.
Yeah. And I
Hmm.
think I remember when we looked at your stuff that you did have that adrenaline dysregulation where it's like more of the emotional wiring, let's say, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would this play out into relationships for him in terms of like in relation to mom and dad, but also like future friendships or even romantic relationships?
So he is going to appear to be more cold. He's going to appear to be less sort of he's not going to use emotion as a tool. He's not going to express through emotion. And so that creates friction, right? But it's also wired, like he's wired for leadership,
Wow.
right? And that's a unique place where it's like big picture, macro, binging, only highly prioritizing what matters and not caring about anything else. Very logical in his approach, very intellectual in his recall, void of emotion to some degree, right? So that's a leadership trait if used the right way. And yeah, in relationships, it's going to be somewhat challenging. Where if now this recording that he's going to be watching in 10 years, right? Now he's now he's going to understand. Callahan, I'm talking to you right now. Now you get why people say it matters more than you think. You know why it's like, why don't you care? Why aren't you interested? Right? And to them, they actually believe that. They believe that he doesn't care. He's not interested. Why isn't he showing me some level of, care? It's not that he doesn't care. He's not using the emotion he feels as a decision-making tool.
Wow.
For other people, that's the filter they think through, and that's what drives what they actually decide to do. He doesn't do that. He gets what it feels like, but he doesn't care about that driving an outcome.
Hmm. So it's
Yeah.
going to be hard for him to express how he feels about somebody one day.
Yeah, it likely will be. And not that he doesn't feel it, not that he doesn't care. For him, it's like, we know who all the people around us are. You know who you lean on when you need support. You know who you can pick up a call and, you can talk to that person and get the guidance you need. And you know who, no, I don't do that with this person. He's going to be that guy. Right.
That's
Yeah. And so now wrap that all up in his leadership strength, we also need that. We need people that, like,
Yeah.
whoever his life partner is going to be will get incredible value out of that, of this person who actually takes charge and leads and builds. And, so that's also a strength. We have to know what our strengths are and find the context where we fit. He doesn't need to be the emotional leader. Somebody else can.
Right. So how does this play into epigenetics? Like, I'm just wondering how much, because epigenetics are obviously the environment that activates DNA, it turns the switch on and off, whatever like type of analogy you want to use. I'm just wondering, like, what if, 5 years from now, I'm noticing that he is actually super emotional. Like, is that possible because through epigenetics, we could like play around with whether these genes turn on and off, or is it like much more complex than that?
So the functional genes that we're looking at aren't so affected by epigenetic expression. That whole concept of I did something, I ate something, I breathed something, and a gene turned on or off is really applied to the science of genetic conditions. So there's certain genes that are that will cause cancer, that will cause autism, that will cause like an actual genetic condition uh, that are a tiny fraction of what we're actually dealing with. Even if we use the word autism, for example, the vast majority isn't a disease. It's, environmental factors, etc. Right? But there is a very real thing where people are born with behavioral development issues. So what's the difference? Expression means a gene got turned on or off, a trigger, right? In the functional genes, what we're looking at, metabolism, detoxification, hormones, these genes are working all the time. These are your core processes and core systems that are just always on, right? And there's hard coding and hard wiring of how you do those jobs. And they aren't so affected by expression. And even if they are, it's temporary, meaning suppose you have, and by the way, this is Callahan, he's more estrogen dominant. He makes a lot more estrogen, which means you can now look into the future and say that he's going to be a big, strong guy. We had this misconception that strength and mass comes from testosterone. It actually comes from estrogen. And he is going to be that football linebacker as opposed to a sprinter. So you know to plan for the right thing, right? But
Hmm.
having said that, hormones, you can take DIM or sulforaphane and you can alter, we know from the supplement world, tools people use to balance hormones because they do speed up and slow down genes that drive like aromatization and production of estrogen, for example, right? But that's temporary so long as the input is in your body. If I take DIM for 5 days, I slow down the expression of a gene called CYP19A1 and I'm making less estrogen. The day I stop, I go back to where I started, right? That's how the functional genes work. And it's more of a volume. It's not like a on or off. It's more like slow it down, speed it up. It's still what it is, a little less or a little more,
Hmm.
right? So what you might see with him and where neurochemical outcome is shifted far more than genetic expression has to do with the other systems. For example, 85% of your serotonin is made in your gut. Half of your dopamine is made in your gut. So when the behavior doesn't match the DNA, it's not usually an expression thing. It's more like, now let's start exploring leaky gut, right? Or maybe because he's so highly estrogenic, which he is, estrogen drives more of a worrier anxiety type response, whereas androgens and testosterone drives more of a warrior response. So if his mood is altered, it may not have anything to do with her neurochemicals, but have to do with the hormones that are driving a shift in perception, right? And so when we go through anybody, I would say to anybody that comes into any program or service, we always say it doesn't matter why you're here, what you think is broken, what goal you're trying to achieve. We have to go through every single system to get to the net result
Right.
because everything influences everything,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Just going back to what we were talking about, just to wrap that up about learning ADHD, everything you said, the snippets that you are making these conclusions from, what are they? Because I want people to have them if they want to go cross-reference their DNA if they've had their DNA done.
So MAO and COMT, these are the two genes that break down and remove dopamine from your head. And by the way, either extreme could be labeled as ADHD. In his case, he's way too slow. So he gets stuck in reward or pleasure for too long, which means he's content and isn't interested in what needs to get done. Looks like ADHD. But the opposite is also true. You might have ultra rapid clearance, the fastest possible genes, which also looks like ADHD from a different place, which is I'm in and out so quickly. It's always like, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Right? But now the filter is what needs to get done, next, 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 versus what I want, which looks like I'm a flake. I procrastinate, right? So similar outcome, didn't get it done. Why? Because I'm always seeking what's next, can't finish, can't start because I'm so content,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. In terms of extracurricular activities and this profile that you're seeing, when a kid is estrogen dominant, and you're talking about like the structure of their body and their build, are there certain sports or things that like they could really flourish in that I should be like thinking about as we move forward?
Yeah. So if we look at his full hormone cascade, there's a couple things that stand out. One, yes, he definitely is far more estrogenized. He makes a lot of testosterone, maximum possible. But after doing that, so the pathway looks like this: cholesterol converts into progesterone, converts into testosterone, converts into estrogen. And there's a gene that determines to what degree you're doing each one of those jobs. So step one, he's taking his progesterone and rapidly, ultra rapidly filling this bucket of testosterone, right? So he's making a lot. Then this gene pathway for aromatization is taking that bucket of testosterone and somewhat rapidly in a male context, maybe the right amount in a female context, but in a male context, converting it to estrogen. So net result, a lot of testosterone to fuel this estrogen. So estrogen dominant. But he's also not clearing what's called dihydrotestosterone, which is the sort of manly man superpowered version of testosterone. He's making the right amount. There's a detox pathway called glucuronidation, which is responsible for the removal of DHT, and he's missing a couple of those genes. Well, I should say missing one and suboptimal in the other. And so whatever DHT he's making lingers for a long time. So he needs to lift heavy and exhaust his muscle. He has two traits. One is he's designed for, um, so if he were in ideal shape, he would look like The Rock. Yeah.
My husband's gonna love that.
Yeah. Why? Because he would be big and strong, but also ripped and lean. Right? That's what he would look like. Some people are more wiry, thin frame. Some people are just big and bulky, but no striation, no muscle. He would be both. If he moved in the way he was designed. And this is a cool thing about hormones that isn't spoken of. We think of hormones as reproductive health and body design and hair and skin, which is all true. But
Yeah.
hormones also fuel physical activity. And we inherit the hormones of how our body assumes we're going to be moving. So he seems like more of a warrior, which is like lifting heavy, moving, but also his muscles have a lot of endurance. He's meant to like keep pushing until failure, right?
Hmm.
And that's like warrior genetics. I'm big, strong, but I also can keep going and not exhaust. And I actually need that level of endurance to not create prostate health issues, to not have hair loss, because that leftover DHT, if underutilized, starts to cause problems, right? So yeah, so in his case, I would say it is like deeply athletic with strength, heavy lifting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sports wise, we're talking like rugby, football, hockey then
Yeah,
versus
he's like a football player. That's
football.
if you were to prototype him, that's who he is. That's his avatar.
Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if I can allow that. Because there's just so many issues with people getting hurt and brain damage with football. It makes me
Well,
nervous that
here's another cool thing about him. I did a lot of work with the NFL alumni, so the retired players and concussion. And the primary pathway we look at for neuroplasticity is called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So, aim head hitting the wall. Why some kids get concussion and some don't.
yeah.
He actually has great BDNF genes. So his brain's ability to develop itself and the neuroplasticity that first of all prevents concussion, but also helps recover. He does excellent. So even his head, his noggin is designed to take a beating and not get affected. This also speaks to mood, whereby things will kind of mean a little less to him because he does such a good job of neuroplasticity. Whatever new information, new concept he's experiencing, it's very easy for him to process it
Hmm.
a little quickly, and so its experience is not having a lot of weight. Where somebody with bad neuroplasticity experiences that same new information, takes them longer to process, seems like a bigger deal to them, right?
Hmm.
You're also going to see less of a drama queen response from him. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of like the different types of schooling, like and this might be too specific, but with his profile, do you think he could potentially do better in a Montessori, Waldorf, nature school, private school, public school? Like, what do you kind of see when you work with families with a kid with a similar profile to Callahan?
Yeah, he is wired for that like Waldorf experience, that, deep in the arts, deep in using your hands, deep in like, guiding and learning and driving, developing the body through engagement. Like he wants to be enjoying, he wants to be engaged, right? As opposed to being told and the pressure of like the competitiveness.
Yeah.
That's not going to be good for him, right? Not that it's going to be bad for him, but he's not wired to seek it, right?
Right.
He's wired to like engage, enjoy, and learn through the experience, and that's what Waldorf is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But potentially that could be different with him playing sports though, with the competitiveness. If he's passionate about the sport.
If he's passionate about the sport, he'll binge and he'll practice all day, all night, and he'll never stop, right? If he doesn't like it, he won't even pick up the ball.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of health conditions, I'd love to explore things like autism. Obviously that's such a hot topic. Does his genetic profile say anything about that with your experience?
So where we look are the cellular health pathways,
Hmm.
right? So how effectively does his body deal with toxins coming in? How effectively does his body deal with the cellular energy required to be resilient against those toxins? And then mapping out uniquely which detox pathways are exposed. And there are some challenges there, and it's good to know because now you can take control and deal with that stuff, right? So this story of like, vaccinations and heavy metals and etc. and this fear, right? So he is wired for challenges there, and he is one of those kids where we would say take it easy, like separate or separate, not stacking too many things all at once. So why? Let's get into it. So the glutathione pathway drives this master antioxidant that we've all heard of called glutathione. And where he's doing really well is his body's ability to actually use a glutathione. So if you were to take some with the glutathione he makes, it gets very well instructed. So it's with precision targeting toxins as opposed to potentially nutrients and minerals and things that you don't want to target. So he does a really good job of directing his glutathione activity. Where he's not doing a good job is the first lines of defense. So
Hmm.
when it comes to respiratory, he's about minus 60% in this glutathione activity of airborne inhalation-based toxins. So there's no filter for him. So mold, plastics, pesticides, fragrances, things like that are going to mean a lot more to him than they do to average children.
Wow.
So, and you might notice, like in your clean biohacked home, he feels great. Then he goes to visit a friend and he gets a headache and doesn't feel so good because they might
Mhm.
have artificial fragrances in their home that his body can't filter. So he's going to need respiratory support, retinol, vitamin A. There's certain mushrooms like tiger milk mushroom that are really good for respiratory tissue development. And he's also going to need to purge the environment of all the airborne toxins and potentially have air filtration where he sleeps. He just can't tolerate it, right?
Wow.
Yeah. The second layer to him is the glutathione activity of the gut. This one has a unique nuance called a copy number variation, which means in this gene, it's not just about a SNP or like a variant. He doesn't even have the gene, it's missing. So both you and his dad decided not to give him a copy. And well, I don't know if you decided, just didn't do it, right? And so now this gene is missing from his genetic code. And this is the primary driver of glutathione activity in the gut tract. And so he has no defense. So
Mm.
for him, yeah, whatever he eats, it's literally the choice between disease and not disease. So when we see kids with, you know, um, eczema, psoriasis, migraines, uh, poor immune function, it often has to do with this pathway and the gut being completely disrupted, dysbiotic, leaky, and the immune system being compromised,
Wow.
right? So for you, like gut maintenance and
Yeah.
whether that's bone broth or, aloe vera or glutamine, things like that, it's going to be a big deal for him. And second is like, unless you plucked it or killed it, he doesn't need it, right? It's got to be clean, 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 clean because he has zero defense in his gut
Wow.
and everything is an insult to him. So going to birthday parties and eating all that the stuff, like it's going to be a big deal for him. And he'll notice, he'll be far more sensitive to like, I went to my friend's house, ate some cookies, and I don't feel good, right? So that's another layer. Now, after the toxins get in, which for him, their susceptibility, good. So the police force in his bloodstream that's looking for the toxins, that's doing a great job. They're just far too much getting in, right? So
Right.
second layer to him is now that the toxins get in, there's this question of, okay, some people experience the toxic burden because they don't filter, but they still recover quickly. And some people linger in that inflammation or headache or joint pain for some time. What's the difference there? The difference is cellular energy production. So his innate mitochondrial function is potentially the worst possible, right? So his ability to actually do two things: produce cellular energy, not
Mm.
just energy that you feel, but also the energy that drives all these biological processes that you never feel, right? That is like minus 70%.
Wow.
And second is to deal with oxidative stress.
Mm.
So, for example, now we go back to sports. He should not be doing any cardiovascular training, right?
Hmm.
He's going to have to because of school, right? But it's not like he's not running on treadmills. He's not doing long distance biking. He's not doing high intensity. He's wired for low intensity resistance type movement. Work the muscle, don't work your lungs, right? He can't handle the extra oxidation from taking in all that extra oxygen, which his mitochondria use to make energy and create oxidants. And he's going to be overwhelmed by the oxidants. It's going to cause inflammation everywhere. That's why some people,
Wow.
go on a 5 mile run and they're good. Some people go on a 5 mile run, next day can't get out of bed. That's him, right? So he's going to need mitochondrial support. And that, you know what to do already, right?
Yeah.
Don't need to tell you that, right? So gut support, mitochondrial support, it's a big priority for him. He's like literally born at minus 70%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, because he has presented with some eczema. And I have had his gut microbiome already tested at 5 months old, and now we're retesting this month. And it was actually pretty good. But I tested him before we introduced foods, and now we've introduced foods. So I'm super curious how it's doing. And I'm trying to obviously source everything as clean as possible. But this is really, really interesting to think about.
So his genetic ability to actually maintain the diversity of his gut microbiome bacteria is somewhere in the middle, right?
Okay.
It's not good, it's not bad. So he's going to be an average Joe when it comes to maintaining. Like if he were to take an antibiotic and needs to build back or whatever it is, he's kind of middle road to maintaining. The challenge is more the actual physical structure of the gut wall, the intestinal tract itself. Right?
Yeah.
The actual that's where his big struggle is. Um, so there's that too. Now, in terms of the next layer, which is okay, he doesn't do good with preventing the toxins from getting in, and he doesn't have great cellular energy to bounce back and recover. So it may linger if you don't manage things properly. The third layer is the actual innate anti-inflammatory response. That for him is also somewhat suboptimal.
Wow.
So the methylation, which does really multiple things. We think of methylation as this like autism gene, right?
Mm.
Why do we think that? Because methylation is responsible for non-water soluble toxins, metals, plastics, things that are hard to detoxify. They get methylated, converted, and then eventually removed. Your gut microbiome is also important for that. But so that the primary gene in that pathway, he's suboptimal. So some of the other ones are doing well. And think about methylation more as like a chain where there's all these genes that make up the individual links. But if one of the major genes is not good, then the entire chain becomes weaker. It can only go work to the strength of that one, right? So his primary MTHFR is suboptimal. Some of the other ones are good, but this one is weak. So four things: anti-inflammatory response, not so good; non-water soluble toxins, metals, plastics, etc., doesn't remove so effectively; nutrient conversion. So if he eats a carrot and you think he's getting beta carotene, he's not so good to convert that beta carotene into a form that actually gets into the cells, right?
Mhm.
Fourth layer to methylation is managing the expression of genes, the exact thing you asked about, right? So the tool that determines if I walk into a room and smell some chemicals, my detox gene should kick into high gear. If I walk into a room and there's a tiger chasing me, my adrenaline and my strength and hormones would change to give me the strength I need at that time, right? So that's gene expression. So he also is not going to adapt effectively because his methylation is suboptimal. So the expression of the gene, there's a bit of a lag time to turning the volume up and down. So now the cool thing is there's really not a lot that needs to be done to fix it. All that's happening is he can't process folic acid so well. So you want to not give him enriched flour, enriched bread, enriched pasta, that type of stuff. You
Mhm.
probably already don't do that, right?
No.
Yeah. So so then I know you're in Canada and it's challenging because in Canada it's like mandated that all these grains are sprayed with folic acid. So it's hard, but he can't eat that stuff, right? Second is he's probably lacking folate. And I would say after vitamin D, folate is probably the second most important nutrient for every sort of process in your body. You name it, it's involved, right? And so the regular 5 MTHF is what he would need, or he can just eat folate-rich food like beef liver, for example, right?
Yeah.
But he's going to need that support. He needs more than the average person. The
Interesting.
other area, sorry?
No, keep going. It's okay.
Okay. The other area where his methylation may need support is cobalamin or B12. So the standard form of B12 that we get is methyl, and it's usually swallowed. He needs it sublingually under his tongue, and he needs a unique form called adenosyl.
Mhm.
So he's genetically wired for an ancestry that ate more like goat, lamb, sheep versus beef. Right? So if he's going to eat a lot of beef, he's probably not, his B12 levels might show high in his blood, but it's not intracellular the way it's supposed to be. So he's wired, and you're probably the same, to eat more goat and lamb versus beef,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I know that I have that same gene expression because I remember like I went and bought a bunch of that supplement,
Yeah.
of that B12 version once I
Yeah.
found that.
And that's something you actually feel. Like there's other things where like you can't really feel preventing cancer, right? But you can feel methylating within days when you start, because every system from your hormones to your mood to like everything shifts and there's more energy.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's something that anyone listening, when you start to work on methylation, you'll literally within days feel different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now I'm still nursing him and I'm taking a prenatal still that has the folate in it. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming that through breast milk he's
Oh yeah.
getting some of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You are what you ate.
Yes. Yeah. That's so true in that context. Um, I haven't put him on any supplements. Oh, no, like he's on different probiotics, and he's been on vitamin D before, but I haven't even looked into multis or anything like that because he's just so young. I just don't know if it's necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not necessary. But
Yeah.
once he gets to like, so I would say even in, it's not even that he needs supplements, etc. If he were just have folate rich foods in his youth, right? Beef liver is one of the best things that you could give him for this, right?
Yeah.
And just knowing that he's not going to get it from our standard food sources, which are grains. The form that is delivered is not the best. Folic acid for him, so it's required and it should be done through food.
Yeah. Yeah. We have organ meat at least once a week. So,
Cool. Yeah.
and he eats it and he loves meat. Like he loves it.
Yeah.
Loves steak. Like it's great.
Yeah.
He loves food actually in general. We don't have any issues with food,
Cool.
with him. I'm curious if there's anything else that sticks out to you in his genetics that you're like, you need to know about this. Like, let's talk about it.
Since you brought up that thing about food, I'm actually going to take a look because I didn't look at this before,
Okay.
but there's some people that literally genetically will overeat,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. And let's just take a peek since you brought that up. Let's see if it's coming from a healthy microbiome or is it coming from an actual inability to feel satiated. So,
Ah.
yeah. So if I look at this, one second, we're just getting to it. Um, there's a couple other things that stand out here. Um, so yeah, he's got issues.
Oh, good. Great.
Let me tell let me tell you what's going on. Okay, so there's two genes here, FTO and MC4R, and these both regulate satiety. So what he's doing is there's a signal from the gut to the brain
Mhm.
to let your brain know I'm good, I've eaten enough, shut the ghrelin and hunger hormones off, don't need any more food, right? So his gene pathway has a real serious lag time, like 15-20 minutes lag time. So
Hmm.
he's full, but he literally doesn't know he's full,
Yeah.
right? And so he will overeat. He's wired for literally obesity.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you stack this with his estrogen dominance, this is an obesity profile. But now
Wow.
knowing this, absolutely preventable.
Yeah.
So estrogen dominance will lead to fat retention. It will lead to a bigger body type, right? And it's very easy for excess calories to fuel fat retention because estrogen dominance leads to like the warrior that if there was famine or there was battle, this is the person that stayed and took care of everyone. So they're really good at storing fat, right? So what's going on? FTO, he doesn't know when he's full. There's like literally a delay. Second thing, MC4R regulates satiety of the palate. And there's meant to be a certain level of variety of signals from soft, hard, sweet, sour, all these textures and flavors. The more diversity is, the faster you get satiated. So he also is suboptimal there. So the FTO gene is worst possible. MC4R is like slightly suboptimal. So his gut can't feel full and his mouth can't get satisfied. So it's more like I need my second helping, third helping. And also, even after that, I still need my stacking. I still need my grazing. I still need the Doritos and the cookies, the wow factor, right? Because his palate isn't satisfied. Remember, I was saying earlier that he seems hormonally designed to be like a warrior,
Mm-hmm.
big, strong, but also ripped and lean, and a lot of endurance in the muscle. This is a warrior trait also, which is I don't commonly get access to calories. So when I do, I'm going to pack them in and I also going to seek diversity of flavor profiles to get diversity of nutrition. Right? So he doesn't get satisfied until he's had salty, soupy, crunchy. Now, when we see this, there's two things we usually recommend.
Okay.
There's this there's a lot of things you probably already understand about satiety, etc. But the two biggest ones we tell people is there's this practice in, Okinawa, one of these blue zones where people live forever, right? One of the things they practice is what they call hari hashibu, which means eat until you're 80% full.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is what he's going to need to implement, which means 15 or 20 minutes before his meal time. And it's not going to matter so much now, but as he ages, getting some fiber in water prior to the meal. And the fiber in water starts to trigger that FTO gene to activate. And now you have that gap, the 15 or 20-minute gap is filled, and his actual food is going to feel satisfying at the time that it was supposed to, not in the second or third helping, right? Second is palate. So he's going to very intentionally need nutrient and texture and flavor diversity, which is like, here's the intended meal, here's your plate. But sitting to the side is a little piece of fruit, a little piece of cheese, a little piece of chocolate, some nuts to crunch on, crunchy, sour, sweet, soft, so, like all of it, right? And you're going to hack the satiety by his brain receiving all these signals and this gene changing its expression and stopping the demand for more snacking.
Wow.
Yeah. And so two simple things that would literally the decision between is this kid going to be obese or not? Because he's literally wired for obesity. He's going to be very hard for him to stop eating and know when to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like both of our families where that might come from. I know it's not from me because like I'll just stop eating and I will leave food on the plate because I'm just full and I'm done. Like I don't, this whole idea of like finish the food on your plate is not something I've ever subscribed to or felt. And it's interesting when I think about raising kids and teaching them about nutrition and like the philosophy around food even. But then like, how do you bring their DNA into it? Like you're talking about so that they don't overeat and that you can support them on a cellular level, but also teach them about eating healthy food and appropriate snacking and not snacking. Like it's pretty complex.
Yeah, it is. In as much as it's complex, once you have the set of habits, remember you asked me about my kids, and I said it's like intuitive now, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like going through it once, understanding it, shifting gears on what the priorities are. How do you make decisions? And then you just make decisions through those filter and it becomes automatic, right? So just the same, if I look at his macros, his body's ability to process saturated fat is the worst possible. So, him on like a keto diet would not work out so well. He would have to take breaks to cycle on and off, but he also doesn't do so well with starch. And so here's a challenge where both of the main macros, he's struggling a little bit, right? He also, by the way, doesn't do a good job of making the enzymes for plant proteins. So beans, lentils, chickpeas. So he's going to struggle there a little bit also. So you got all these macros where he's not doing well. And that's complex because there's nowhere where it stands out like you're good at this, go eat this. It's like all of it are kind of not working. So now it's more like the dose becomes the challenge as opposed to like, you can't eat this because your genes say you can't. No, it's like you can't process fat. So don't eat more than as an adult, like a fistful, right? Because once you get to a total metabolic load where it's like beyond what your metabolism can tolerate, that's when it starts to cause insulin issues, etc. And the other thing I would say is, establishing a bit of a metabolic reset. He's the type of guy that's going to need to once a year go through some kind of very strict carnivore, very strict zero carb type thing to just reset his metabolism and bring it back down from a 8 out of 10 state more to like a 2 out of 10 state. Some people don't need to do that. He will need to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Or what about like fasting, like daily fasting?
Yeah. So now there's genes we look at for fasting, and one is metabolic rate and one is, by the way, the hormones. So when you're more estrogen dominant, we don't suggest daily intermittent fasting. And the estrogen dominance receives that signal as too much stress and more of a starvation signal. And it's going to drive fat retention as opposed to fat loss over time. So one thing for him is go ahead and fast, but he would be better off with like mixing it up and challenging his metabolism. So maybe fasting a couple days a week, maybe one long fast every couple of weeks, 24, 72 hours, right? He'd be better off with that. The other thing that informs fasting is metabolic rate. And that part he's actually doing really well. So his ability to shift gears and adjust and bounce back, he's doing well, which supports what we were just saying of challenging his metabolism and switching it up. The switch up would happen for him fairly quickly. He would respond well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good to know. Cause like, obviously, I do so many things that are healthy and our home is very healthy. And our kid, if we have more kids, our kids will be very healthy. But then at some point, there's only so much I can do for him and he has to make his own decisions. So these like years in the beginning are so pivotal of like teaching those healthy habits of nutrition and what to eat and not to overeat and what that all looks like. And it's complicated when it's a kid, right? Like they don't necessarily understand, like, why can't I have one more sandwich? Like, what's wrong with that? Like that's complicated.
Yeah, especially when everyone else is doing it, right?
Yeah.
Hard to believe that everyone's poisoning themselves. Well, you'll one day grow up and find out about the chronic disease burden and you'll understand, right?
Yeah.
So it is true, but I will also say what you're doing is exactly what needs to be done is you're developing a culture, like you're fostering beliefs and the culture of your home that's who they're going to become, right? And it's okay for that to be part of the culture. Like how important is clean food?
Yeah.
You know?
That's pretty wild though. Like just putting all of these pieces together and like thinking about his future of like, taking everything we talked about in terms of like exercise, detoxing, hormones, and nutrition, like all of those different pillars, and then thinking, okay, if he makes these decisions, he could go this pathway of being a warrior, The Rock Johnson, that type of way, or he could get stuck and go the other way and really struggle with obesity potentially for his entire life.
So what you just said is the exact same thing that I've been trying to help the world understand that genetics was supposed to do. So, and most people don't, even the clinicians and scientists the PhDs that study genetics don't understand it from the context you just said. What the world believes is genes are destiny and it equals a propensity to something. What is my risk for this? What is my risk for that? Really what we're saying is your genes tell you where certain biological systems are failing, not doing such a good job, that allows you to decide what your habits are. So it's really a question of you're making choices every day, all day. What if you always made the right choice? Right? But how do you know what that is? Trial and error is one way, or your genes will tell you, here's a priority your gut doesn't detoxify. So that's what you got to work on. And by the way, food makes a big deal for you versus someone else doesn't matter so much. Right? Here's a priority, poor mitochondrial function. So that needs to be worked on. This is why you don't want to go to school. This is why your mood is off. It's not a neurochemical issue. It's an energy issue. So you start to work on the right problems and you also don't waste time, money, and effort on problems that didn't even need to be worked on. And that forms your set of habits. So here's this genetic playbook, the exact things I need to be doing supplement wise, food wise, etc.
Mhm.
The same thing that could have been my kryptonite is actually my superpower. And
Wow.
whether it's your mood, whether it's your metabolism, everything that we see as a problem in your DNA was actually meant to benefit you in a different context.
Right.
Right. And so we need to figure out, what was that context? What was I wired for? Who am I? And start
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, right? Like, how do we foster places where he can work on his leadership skills and not
Yeah.
force him to do things he's not passionate about and then get mad at him and not understand, like, why don't you care about this? Where really he like is very singular focused and like, if he likes it, he likes it.
Yep. Guaranteed he's going to be leaving his dirty socks on the floor, leaving dirty dishes everywhere. He's going to say, yeah, mom, don't worry, I got took care of it. And he's going to just go to his video games and forget what he promised. That's going to be, right?
Great.
But that same thing that looks like, why don't you care, is actually his superpower.
Yeah.
Right? He is a binger. He's a specialist. We got to figure out what that specialty is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of like just in the early years, like let's say the next 10 years coming up while he's a kid, I want to foster an environment like outside of the home that really supports these genes, but I don't want to put him in too many activities. Like you see a lot of kids where Monday to Friday, they're doing two different things every single day after school. So for someone like him, would it just basically be, hey, do you like this thing? Okay, you like it. Let's go all in and like nothing else. Or like, how would I really foster an environment that can really support his genes in this way?
Well, you can look at it both. You can look at one of two ways, more process wise, or like it could be like, tell us what you like and let's focus on that. Right. Or the way he discovers stuff can't be so outcome based, right? It can't be so, you need this because you got to catch up with this kid, or you need this because if you don't do it, you can't get into university. He's going to nod his head, but he won't care, right? It's more like, let's engage in this thing and look how fun this is, right? Let's
Yeah.
engage in this thing and look what you develop. Oh, you want to be able to go to do that sport? Let's go do this first to develop the skill, right? So the outcome he's not going to care about, right? He's going to care about the process. So if you can learn to speak about the process and what he's doing and enjoy that, he's going to get it, right?
Cool.
For some kids, like if you picture, you just described the helicopter mom, right? That like and now picture the child of the helicopter mom was like always wanted to be first place, always wanted to win, always wanted. That's not him, right? So if he's not going to, so you have to play to his strength.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see as he like his development or his personality comes out, right?
Yep.
Like he's still so young right now. But it is really important to have this discussion. And so I would love for you to, one final word for all of the families listening, especially like a lot of the moms listening. What would you say to every mom listening? What would you want her to remember if she were to get her kid's DNA tested, or maybe if she already has the results?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is that chronic disease and the pace at which you age, I believe, is optional, right? Like if you understood that these things aren't switches that just get turned on, that they're caused, the chronic disease that gets diagnosed started 10 years before with your habits. So it's just a question of which habits. Why do different people have different problems, right? Why does one person living in a home get migraines from the mold and the other three people don't even know there's mold in the home? So our genetic ability to deal with certain things is different, and so we're gonna have different outcomes. So just know that if you knew what causes it, you also have discovered what to do about it, and to the root cause as opposed to masking a symptom. Second thing I would say is, for every negative word we can use, ADHD, I don't care, overeat, every negative word you can use, there's also a positive reason why that kid was. There's a gift. There's a hidden gift in there somewhere. He understood that there's a reason why this gene pathway was different than somebody else, because this kid was designed for a specific job, task, goal, outcome. And if you start to hyper personalize and think more bio individual as opposed to like every kid's supposed to do the same thing, and then you realize, who is this kid? and you let them thrive in that thing as opposed to the same thing that they're supposed to thrive at becomes the challenge. Right. And no, having done this literally hundreds of times, we always end up in the same place where the exact same thing that we see as the struggle, we then realize what strength it could have provided, shift context, habits, sports, schedule, structure, and all of a sudden the kid starts to thrive. Because you figure out who they are, and you start letting them be that.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so empowering. And a really important message I think that families really do need to hear. Yeah. If people want to connect with you or get their kids' DNAs tested or their own DNA tested, my goodness, where can they do that and how can they find you?
So two things. If you want to dive deeper, I usually meet with people through the context of programs. So like deep genetic analysis. Let's go through everything, even the things you don't even know you needed to know, right? So if you want to learn about that, go to my Instagram. You'll see in my bio, you can register for a webinar where we go way deeper than this, right? And we'll talk about how you can enroll. If you just want to get a test and do it on your own, that's also possible. Also go to Instagram, go to my bio, and you can just the same link that allows you to register for our webinar and learn more. You can also just buy a test.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was great. I learned so much, and I will put all the links in the show notes and on my website so everyone can find you very easily.
Well, that was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Biohacking with Brittany, where women optimize. If you loved this episode, share it, subscribe, and leave a review to help more women step into science-backed, soul-led wellness. To go deeper, check out the show notes for upcoming retreats, live events, my course, and the latest on socials. Until next time, keep listening to your body, trusting your intuition, and optimizing every step of the way.